Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. At this time, please welcome our next panel session, Accelerating Energy Productivity in an Age of Energy Abundance. Please welcome our panelists, Ms. Kateri Callahan, President, the Alliance to Save Energy; Mr. Martin Durbin, President and CEO, America's Natural Gas Alliance; Ms. Amy Ericson, USA Country President, Alstom; and Mr. Todd Skare, Chief Technology Officer, Praxair Incorporated. And please welcome our moderators, the Honorable Deborah L. Wince-Smith, President and CEO, Council on Competitiveness, and the Honorable David T. Danielson, Assistant Secretary for Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, U.S. Department of Energy.
Empty audience. They're all taking a break. Well, I see that we have a little bit of productivity lapse going on here. But I thought we would be extremely productive and get right into this discussion, because we just have an outstanding group of panelists representing very important public policy, coalitions, industrial trade associations, and then, of course, two companies that are at the forefront of both building energy productivity into their systems and then delivering it to their customers. And we all want to talk about and accelerate President Obama's commitment that Secretary Moniz again exhorted us about this morning, to really move forward to see how we can double our national energy productivity over 2010 levels by 2030. So with that, Assistant Secretary Danielson, you're on the front line for the energy productivity, so why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you, Deborah. You know, one thing I'll point out is this goal of doubling our energy productivity from 2010 to 2030 is an incredibly aggressive goal. I think what I like the most about it is that it's also a very inclusive goal, you know, which I think that the whole industry, everyone in this room, everyone in this conference should see themselves in this goal. And so we're very excited to launch what is our new partnership between the Council and Department of Energy with a new partner, the Alliance to Save Energy, and we're very excited about this partnership. And so with this panel, part of what we want to do is kind of tee up where we, you know, what's the background here, what's the basis, and what can we do together over the next year to really try to map out a pretty clear roadmap for how we're going to tackle the President's challenge. This is not a business as usual accomplishment kind of challenge. This is a very bold, aggressive challenge. And so I wanted to start by throwing it over to Kateri Callahan, the President of the Alliance to Save Energy, to really kind of unpack what this doubling of energy productivity goal means. And you know, the Alliance has been a thought leader here. It was really their idea that they came up with, that then got adopted by the administration. And I think she has a very clear picture of how this, how this came together, and what we're going to have to do together to address this challenge. So Kateri, let me pass it over to you.
Thanks very much, Dave. And let me say that how much the Alliance to Save Energy appreciates the new partnership with the Council on Competitiveness and the Department of Energy. Dave, I love it that you're giving us full credit for the goal, and actually it was a commission that we put together on national energy efficiency policy that articulated that goal first. But we love to give due credit to the President and the administration, because now it has truly become a national goal. So let me just spend a couple of minutes giving you a bit of the background and history on the goal and how we got to that, and how we believe, because the important work is ahead of us, that we can implement policies within all sectors of government and the private sector with you folks that will allow us to actually achieve that goal, or perhaps even exceed it. So let me start by saying that Dave is exactly right. It's a big, hairy, audacious goal. But what we found through a year's worth of work with a commission was that it's also a very doable goal. And with achieving that goal come very, very good things to our country. So the commission was chaired by Senator Mark Warner, who's the chair of the Alliance to Save Energy, and Tom King, who's the president and CEO of National Grid, a very large utility in the Northeast. And the commission was a who's who across all sectors of the economy, and included academicians, included Dan Arvizu, the head of the National Renewable Energy Lab, former Governor Pataki, just to name a couple of them, who all came together and said, we need to look at making energy efficiency the next shale gas. Now, I'm stealing that from Chad Holliday, but it was a great line this morning. And what they said was, you know, there's so much potential for energy efficiency. How do we tap into that? How do we mine that? So the first thing they wanted to do was set a big, hairy, audacious goal that was doable so that it forced them to think outside the box about what kind of recommendations needed to be made. And initially, we were looking at a goal of reducing energy consumption. Energy efficiency reduces energy consumption. But the problem with that, they thought, was that it wasn't inclusive enough. It didn't bring enough people to the table. And it also didn't give people intuitively the understanding that by using less, you could do more. And that's what got us on the track of thinking about the economy. It's the economy, stupid. Remember, that's all important right now. And how do we improve the economy through use of energy efficiency? So we landed on the energy productivity notion of getting more out of each national energy dollar we spend, getting more GDP from each unit of GDP, getting more of that for each dollar that we spend. And then we looked at, well, what is it possible to do? And that's where we landed on doubling energy productivity, and that's built on a history. Is it doable? The answer is clearly yes. As the Secretary indicated today, we've actually doubled energy productivity in this country in the last 40 years, between 1970 and now. We've doubled energy productivity. And EIA estimates that with business as usual, even if we don't do anything more than we've already done to drive energy efficiency and new technology, we're going to get a 53% improvement between now and 2030. So what we're looking at is going one better, adding 47% improvement. And we believe that that is quite doable. But we wanted to test that. So Dan Arvizu and his folks out at NREL ran some models looking at policies that underpin energy efficiency advancement in the United States at all levels of government, state policies, state and local policies, and national policies. And they said, if we model this out and we simply adopt best practices from around the country by all states and by the nation, can we achieve the goal? And they found that we not only can achieve the goal, we could actually exceed it. So what are those policies? That's where we went to next. Once you articulate the goal, you need to look at the policies that can be put in place. And this is where it got, I think, really also very interesting, because the commissioners, unlike a lot of commissions, we didn't go out and hire consultants to do this work. They did the work themselves. The companies brought in their talent. The academicians brought in their talent. The national labs brought in theirs. The policymakers brought in theirs. And they said, we don't want this, if we're going to spend our time, our energy, sweat, blood, we don't want this to be something that's put on a shelf and not used. We want actionable, implementable policy recommendations, ones that both Democrats and Republicans alike can embrace, and ones that the public can understand that there's meaning in it for them. So the policies that we articulated were about 54. They're built around 3 strategies. Invest. And you heard Secretary Moniz talk today about the investment that the federal government is making. I'm sure you're going to hear from these companies about investments that they're making. Modernize. And you heard the Secretary talk about appliance and equipment standards. And we look at modernizing in an infrastructure basis that includes policy. So utility planning, utility regulatory policies, urban transportation planning policies, getting those modernized and up to date to drive energy efficiency and energy productivity. And the last that's very important is educate. People need to understand and know that by advancing energy efficiency and energy productivity, the returns are very great. And the Secretary articulated those returns, but I want to challenge you all as business folks. If the industry were to invest, according to the work that we had commissioned by the Rhodium Group, if the industry were to invest just $15 billion, and I know that's a big number, but just $15 billion between now and 2030, the return on that investment would be $109 billion. And I challenge you to tell me where else in this economy you get that kind of return. So I'll stop with that, and hopefully we've got some basis, and then we can dive deeper into the recommendations. And again, I'm sure you're going to hear from my colleagues here that many of these strategies are already being employed and that it's helping the bottom line.
Great, thank you, Kateri.
Well, Marty, you are really at the forefront of the shale gas revolution, and we look back even 7 years ago, who would have ever dreamed that the United States would be the largest producer and potentially an exporter on a large scale all around the world? We certainly here at the U.S. Council on Competitiveness, gee, you Americans, you've got this natural gas. It's going to change everything. So could you share with us both your perceptions of how this is impacting our overall productivity and manufacturing, and then link in the energy productivity piece?
Absolutely.
Because it's a double whammy and a double opportunity.
No question. And again, first, thanks for the invitation to be here this morning. And I guess as the only representative of producers, I did want to, frankly, take a moment to almost challenge the premise of the panel here to say that can we meet this productivity and move technology, in spite of low prices and abundant energy. I would turn it on its head and say we're going to be able to do it because of the abundance and low cost of natural gas. The shale revolution was driven by technology and innovation. This was not Jed Clampett going out and shooting for some food. This was very entrepreneurial companies that are employed, you could almost say space-age technology that is now allowing us to unlock this resource that we have. So we now are not only the largest natural gas producer in the world, but the only uncertainty about the supply is how big is it? Every year, the projections from EIA go up. If you go back 9 years, or just 5 years to 2009, we've more than doubled the projections in that short amount of time, and it's expected to double again. Just in 1 year's time, it went up 26%. And then you look at the other end on what are the projections on price. Again, if you go back to 2009, the projection was that we'd have gas at $13 in 2030. Well, now nobody thinks it's going to be anywhere above $5 or $6. Again, I can't guarantee prices, and I'm not doing that. But it does show that we've really got an opportunity here because of this shale energy revolution. It's not only driving technology in our industry, and let's say every day we're seeing increases in the productivity on the production side. We've now got, just the other day, it was announced that the most productive well in the country up in northeast Pennsylvania is producing 30 MCF a day. 10 years ago, the most productive produced about 5, a little more than 5. So that's a 5-time increase in productivity just in the wells we've got. You can measure it by saying how many drill rigs are out there. The number of drill rigs keep going down, but production keeps going up. Now, part of that's because of associated gas we're getting with oil production, but it's also this efficiency and productivity. But I think even more important is that the industry and natural gas is driving technology and innovation throughout the rest of the economy. So as we get to not only the distribution and transmission of the gas itself, but then we get to the manufacturing side of it. And look at how many companies are now already building here, petrochemicals. We've got $56 billion in capital already being invested just in a handful of facilities for ethylene, ammonia, and methanol. And there's more than $100 billion in capital sitting on the table, and it's all being driven by this abundance and affordability of natural gas. Gets into power generation, distributed generation, transportation, again, it's throughout the economy. So it really is an incredible opportunity, but also recognize that we're kind of the disruptive technology right now. We're kind of upsetting the apple cart in a lot of these different markets to figure out, well, how do we accommodate this incredible opportunity? So a lot in front of us here, both challenges and opportunity, but I think it all looks positive.
Before I turn it over to Dave again, let me just ask a follow-up question, because you mentioned, very importantly, the impact on productivity into the whole supply chain through the use of this natural gas. But let's, building off our last fabulous panel on the technological frontiers, what are you all seeing in terms of the productivity tools that are going to actually enhance the processes of extracting and using natural gas, moving beyond fracking and the water and all of that?
Well, I mean, don't forget that every one of these facilities in the manufacturing side that's being built, whether it's a R&D facility to help drive it or the manufacturing facility, these are all going to be state-of-the-art facilities that use the best technology, most efficient technology, and they're going to be, producing goods. If you just think again on the chemical side, with my background there, all those insulation products and all those things are going to go into making our buildings more efficient, making our products more efficient. Again, this is just, as we see now, one of the challenges is to make sure we have the infrastructure in place so that we can get the gas itself for the power, but all those gas liquids that are going to help drive the, the petrochemical side and the, and the rest of those products down the line.
Great, thank you, Deborah. Well, Todd Skare, the CTO of Praxair, not a consumer-based company, but a $10 billion a year, what I like to kind of say is like an Intel Inside company for industry. Major player in industrial gases and a number of other areas. And so I think you have a unique point of view as, we're talking about the broad vision here, the broad opportunity, but as a senior executive at a major industrial corporation, I think who both does a lot of work improving your own bottom line through energy productivity measures, but also as a major supplier to companies that are going to be looking to improve their energy productivity. Can you, maybe walk us through a little bit from your perspective, when you look at a bold goal like this, doubling by 2030, the kind of things that you're already doing and the kind of things that you may have to look at going forward to be leaders as part of this major new goal that we're getting after?
Sure, and again, similar to Marty, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I think it's a really great initiative and a nice event. Praxair is an industrial gas company, and as you said, maybe not a household name, but similar, as we heard from PPG, the things that we make are in a lot of the products, are used to make the products that are, anything from a beverage to steel to glass. Industrial gases are a key part of making that. A little bit more where the rubber hits the road is what are corporations doing in productivity? And again, the premise of this is productivity hindered by the fact that energy is so cheap? And I think the answer is no, because of the competitiveness, the competitive environment that we're all living in. When we're competing at home, your competitors enjoy the same advantage in low-cost energy as we would have, so you have to separate yourself either through productivity, better products. And when you're competing, we're still in a global world, and Praxair is competing in a global world. While our energy is less expensive, other parts of significant project expenses, construction costs, some equipment costs, labor costs, we're not the leader there. So I believe this has now put us in a good place, but I wouldn't say that it has given us a clear competitive advantage. So we need to use the resources that we have very efficiently. Inside our own company, productivity is part of what we do. Making our world more productive is our tagline on our company logo, and that's really drives the top line of our company as we work with our customers to find new ways to use our products to make them more efficient, as well as working inside our company. And I think working inside the company is what you'll find in any good company in the United States, and I would argue that if they're not doing that they're not going to be in business very long. And so, of course, we work on efficiency for any new designs, and the numbers that you said about how companies have naturally progressed over time line up with what we're able to do. We're only able to improve our own production of our products maybe 2-3% a year. So you go by 10 years, you're good if you're getting 20-30% better. But the fleet of existing equipment, when big industry puts in machines, they're designed to last 20-30 years. You need to also take those technologies and find a way to put them into that. But then for a company like Praxair, who also has to distribute its products, we look all the way down the value chain, even to how we're distributing our products. Over the last few years, we've installed technology in our trucks. It seems like a very simple thing, a little onboard computer, so we can see, we did it for safety. How are the drivers driving? What are they doing? But you learn other things when you start to look at all this data, all this big data that's out there. We couldn't believe the amount of time that our trucks spent idling. Yeah. Just so when they're filling their trucks, when they're unloading their product, and just by taking control of that and taking that to a low limit, It's a base hit, but in this business of productivity, it's hundreds and hundreds of base hits that lead to an overall efficient environment. I think we have an interesting perspective because our products, which are pure gases like pure oxygen, pure nitrogen, pure hydrogen, are things that as customers, industrial customers use those, their processes tend to get better in the ways that we're talking about. For example, in furnaces for glass or steel, instead of using air, if they move to oxy-combustion, say 100% oxygen or something much higher concentrated, lots of very interesting things happen. They have less gas they have to move. They use less energy to fire those heaters. Sometimes the chemistry becomes different and they just have better products, better yield out of that same unit. So that's why I really appreciate that the President's target has a numerator and a denominator. And in the numerator is productivity, which means that if you're able to make more with what you already had, that counts. And I think, you know, we're positioned with the low energy price we have to really grow in this country. And if we can do that without raising or limiting the amount of new energy that we use, that's even better than conservation. So we have a unique perspective on that, and I see a lot of activities in those areas. I do not see low prices of energy preventing companies from making these investments. Companies are making investments not for 3 years, but for 30 years. They know that energy prices are low today, right. And in the future, I don't know what the energy prices are going to be, but I know they're not going to be the same. They're not going to be the same here. They're not going to be the same in Europe. They're not going to be the same in Europe and the Middle East. So we need to plan for the long term. My view on how we get there, because I said as the path we're on, continuously saving, is a few % per year, and that's not enough, is around acceleration of technologies. Technology takes a long time to develop. Businesses have become less and less patient to wait for those technologies. And also, the demands of the quarterly cycle, you know, makes it difficult to have the imagination to really bring those things forward. So what I look for is I look for continued robust funding of R&D programs that go into this area. And another step is the demonstration projects. I know we're now beginning talks with the Department of Energy around demonstration projects around some of our key enabling technologies. And the more that we can get help on those to prove the technologies, prove them to the customers, the faster they get into the marketplace. And that's what's going to make the difference for 2030.
Well, that's great, Todd. You know, I think it really gives us a good point of view from someone who's boots on the ground, right. You know, trying to solve these problems day to day and seeing what it's going to take to try to get there. Deborah, kick it back to you to back to me? Okay, well, great.
No, I was going to ask Amy a question, and then I think we want to get some back and forth here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Amy Ericson, thank you for joining us as the President and CEO of Alstom North America. And your company's all over the world, but you're at the forefront of building the power equipment and services for all of our infrastructure opportunities and challenges. So how do you really see this intersection of energy productivity and your manufacturing prowess? We had the opportunity a few years ago to be down at your plant in Chattanooga. Yes. And I have to say, it was an amazing place. It's one of the most advanced manufacturing facilities in the world. And to see what you make down there and how you can power, you know, with one of those turbines all of San Francisco was pretty impressive indeed. So tell us really what's on your agenda now to drive home the energy productivity for your customers and yourself.
Thanks.
Big question.
And thank you for having me here again. It's a pleasure. I love the topic of energy productivity, what it means to our company, and we are technology developers and deployers to the power industry, both the generation side and the transmission delivery side. And what it means to us is actually quite simple. It just means helping the power industry to ensure that the greatest portion possible of the electricity they produce actually gets to the consumers, that we get that cycle completed. And this is not a new concept or a new goal for us, but the fact of the matter is there's been a lot of transformation in the power industry here in the US over the past couple of years, not the least of which is, and Kateri spoke about it, a lot of distributed energy resources. and a rapidly changing installed base. So what it means for our industry is that we have to play a balancing act, and we do as well in terms of technology development. We have to balance economic efficiency with environmental footprint and reliability. So when we look at that and translate that into what are our priorities in terms of technology development, it's very similar to what I've heard here on the panel already. The first is maximizing energy conversion, both, again, for generation and transmission. The second is modernizing the incredibly valuable installed base that we have. Our power generation base is average of 30 years old. That sounds old, but there's still incredible financial life left. And on the transmission side, which is 25 years old, again, incredible financial useful life left. And the third is about information. It's about big data. When we develop our technology, we're used to the unit processes, but these days it's actually about making all of our technology smarter by incorporating the information into our solutions. This is particularly important when we talk about fortifying and integrating all of these various energy sources. I just want to give a few examples, and I think it touches a bit on what you talked about. Let's start with gas. I mean, clearly, as we look at the electricity landscape going forward, gas is going to play a huge role. And this is how far we've come. In 1939, the first industrial gas turbine was introduced to the market. It was 4 megawatts. Today, the industry, all of us, are offering 700 plus megawatt combined cycle plants. That would power nearly 500,000 homes at efficiencies greater than 60%. So we've come a long way. Now we talk about renewables and the fact that that is a growing portion of our electricity generating sources. And scale is even important in the renewable world, which might sound counterintuitive because the fuel is free, in essence, the wind, the sun. But the CapEx isn't. So you really want to, capital expenditure, you really want to maximize what you're getting from that CapEx. We've done that with onshore wind. You've seen the size of the machines come up and the costs go down. And the next frontier is actually offshore wind. There's a vast resource out there, and the good news is offshore, the wind is stronger and it's steadier, which means more power, more hours of the day. And if that's not productivity, I don't know what is. So we've partnered with the DOE recently to figure out the future of offshore wind generation, focused on advanced controls to help bring the cost effectiveness to that solution. And we're also launching our first commercial project offshore up in Block Island. So then the question becomes, with all of these bulk renewables, which are so important to our generating landscape for so many reasons, they're often remote from load centers. So how do we make that connection? And the answer is actually in high capacity transmission in the form of HVDC transmission, which can transmit power 2.5 to 3 times faster power per tower, which means that if you're dealing with over 300 miles of distance, which when you're talking about remote hydro and remote wind, you are talking about those distances and more. It is more economic to bring that remote renewable into load centers productively with HVDC. Now, there's a lot more I could talk about. I will stop there, but thank you very much.
Wonderful. Well, I'd love to throw a question out to the panel. I think maybe following on something Todd said about these technology game changers. You know, because again, these are actually, why don't we broaden it a little bit? Policy and technology game changers. You know, if you look at this bold goal, are there 1 or 2 areas where you think, and you know, this is a great chance for us to just kick off some early ideas in a year-long partnership. But are there some hot spots where you think there may be some opportunity? You know, in some of our analysis, and we'll be hearing more from Mark Johnson, who runs our advanced manufacturing office later today. But something as simple as or something that sounds mundane, like low-cost variable speed drive motors, could save 60% of the electricity used by a wide array of companies who are primarily using motive power to get what they need to get done. Separations is another area where we're not even close to the thermodynamic limit in many cases. And so I'd be interested in throwing that out to the panel, and feel free, anyone jump in. Policy or technology game changers that could really move the needle in the energy productivity space?
I'll start. I think on the policy front, there are a couple things. One, the Clean Power Plan that was released and is out now for public comment and is scheduled to go into effect. Section 111D is the other name it rides by, in June of next year. That allows for investment in energy efficiency and energy efficiency to count towards complying with the CO2 requirements of the regulation. We see that as, if the regulation is written appropriately, and if we can get through the evaluation, measurement, verification activities, that could be a game changer. The other is something that Secretary Moniz mentioned today, that it's been a game changer through the last 40 years, but can remain one, and that is appliance and equipment standards. And he gave you some large numbers, but I would mention one. On Monday of this week, DOE issued a rule on refrigerators. And this rule will improve refrigerators' efficiency by another 20 to 25%, saving all of us that buy new refrigerators $200 to $300 a year on our energy bills. And it builds on a series of improvements in the efficiency standards on refrigerators that have gone on since 1978. And so if you buy a refrigerator after the new regulation kicks in versus one in 1978, it is going to use only a quarter of the energy that refrigerator used, but it's going to be 2/3 bigger, and it's going to reduce emissions basically by, I think, 2/3. So, or the price is 2/3 lower, excuse me. So it's 2/3 bigger, 66% less expensive, and only uses a quarter of the energy. So applying that, whether that's on vehicles or technologies that are out there, the light bulb standards, which went into full effect this year, those are game changers. Those are the ways in building energy codes that I think we can really make a difference.
That's great. And the President's Climate Action Plan has very bold goals for us to continue to push out these appliance standards at the an appropriate rate, but at a bold, aggressive rate. And that's in my office. So my staff and I don't sleep very much because the Secretary's coming down to my office every week. Where are we? Other game changers?
Yeah, I guess I'd just add on here, and with or without new regulation, whether it's 111D or not, but with or without that, we're going to see natural gas play a much bigger role in our power generation and in industrial marketplace. So what do we need to make that happen and ensure that that's going to happen? Part of that is infrastructure. And if we just isolate New England for a moment, by far the most infrastructure constrained area of the country. So to be able to get the pipelines necessary that are up there to allow both the generators and the consumers, the industrial users, to have access to that. As I said before, natural gas has kind of come on the scene in the last 5 to 7 years and been kind of a disruptive force. Well, that also is taking place within the market. Look at the different market rules, all the different players that have to come together here, from the pipelines to the generators to the industrial consumers to the governments up there. They're all acting rationally right now under the existing system. But what's happening is that we're not able to quickly enough get the capital out there to make sure these pipelines are built. You've seen it, something that's happened from our industry that, again, is not traditional, where the producers themselves are actually investing in the pipeline itself. So there's one up in New York. There's a few others where the fact that New York City now has access to natural gas, a pipeline coming right in, that was funded by natural gas producers. That's not normally how the financing takes place. We've got to find the right way to, it's not rocket science, but as I said, everybody is acting rationally under the existing system. How do we change that? Governors in New England have been very active in this space. They recognize the infrastructure constraints and are trying to help find a solution. We obviously want to be part of that, but I think it's going to take a lot of us and a lot of different players here to make sure that that piece of the equation is in place for us to fully take advantage of the resource.
I think that both Marty and Amy point out something that doesn't always come to the fore when you're thinking about this energy productivity target, is the importance of infrastructure. The infrastructure itself isn't necessarily making the energy productivity difference, but it's enabling it. Right. And so I think that infrastructure can be a very important part of our partnership and dialogues going forward. And actually, the Energy Policy and Strategic Analysis Office, led by Melanie Kenderdine, is going to be leading this effort on the DOE side with strong involvement by myself and others. And they're leading the Quadrennial Energy Review, the first installment of which will be rolled out over the next year, that is really looking at what they call pipes and wires. It's the infrastructure challenge. So I think that this will be a really exciting topic for our dialogues and conversations going forward. Amy, Todd, game changers?
Yeah, I mean, the easy answers would be energy storage, of course, even carbon capture and utilization, of course. But I'm going to go in a different direction because we already have seen a lot of game changers in the marketplace in the form of demand response, two-way communication with consumers, distributed energy resources. And so it seems to me that the answer will, the game-changing answer will be in the information that's out there, which is now at a lot of different nodes. And being able to collect it quickly, organize it effectively, and turn it into actionable intelligence. And this can help in terms of balancing supply and demand of electricity overall, so optimizing the system. It can help distribution control rooms in terms of fault location, in terms of automated restoration. It can help grids on the wider network keep faults from cascading. To me, the game changer in the near term will be about what we do with real-time information.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's, you know, this idea of big data, you know, automated control, you know, we find that in our company over and over again, that every time we look in detail about how to automate something, how to put in an optimizer for a pipeline system, the amount of savings always surprises us. When you put in an optimizer, it always takes you to a place that you never would have thought intuitive, right? So I think there are things there. As far as game changers, I've been in this game of productivity for a long time, and actually I don't even believe in game changers. I think it really is hundreds and hundreds of base hits, and it's what the president said. You know, all of the above was something else, but I think we need to be working in all of these areas to get to this goal, and you're not going to find one silver bullet that makes all of this happen. I have a house in Connecticut. I can tell you that I'm not enjoying low energy prices right now. So we need to be hitting on all these different cylinders to really get to this productivity goal. So, you know, I look for, you know, continued support from the DOE, a friendly investment environment that rewards the individuals or the companies that take the risk and put their technologies out there and try and make that happen on an accelerated basis.
Well, I find that exciting. I think two things that wouldn't have necessarily, they wouldn't have come right to my mind, which I think is great, is infrastructure and this kind of smart grid, smart manufacturing opportunity. I think you'll hear more from Mark Johnson, again, from our Office of Advanced Manufacturing, on our interest in smart manufacturing and some estimates that we have when, if you could go to kind of real sensors and controls, real-time model-based control, that you could see improvements of 30% or more in energy efficiency. You know, invert that, that's a pretty big chunk of this doubling goal that we would have for energy productivity going forward.
And I'll just add that we have a lot of that capability to do what we're talking about in our national laboratories. With our supercomputing capability and our modeling and simulation and developing a workforce. So maybe that's another goal going forward, is to really take advantage of that as part of our initiative.
I think what's fascinating for me, having come through the commission work and the 54 recommendations, is that we're all hitting and touching on those. I love Todd's analogy that it's base hit after base hit, because our recommendations really run the gamut across all sectors of the economy and policymakers at all levels and the private sector. And so it's going to take everybody pulling together if we're going to pull off a game changer and double energy productivity.
That's great. Well, we've come to the end of this panel. We're going to have one final very exciting speaker, I think, before we break for lunch. But let's thank the panelists for a wonderful discussion.
Thank you. Thank you.